Two officers pulled into the gas station on Route 17 and threw Danny Harmon face first onto the concrete before he even had time to turn around. His palms split open on the asphalt. His wife was standing 10 feet away screaming his name, and nobody, not one single person at that station, moved to help her. Then they ripped the leather vest off his back and tossed it in their trunk like a piece of garbage. Sarah posted the video that night. 4 million people watched by morning. Mayor Dale Whitmore went on television and called it a victory. What Whitmore didn't know, what nobody in that city knew, was that 61-year-old Rex Callahan had already seen the video. And men like Rex Callahan don't make noise when something like this happens. They make calls. Stay with this one. Because what 600 motorcycles did to this city next, nobody saw coming. She drove home, sat at the kitchen table, watched the 43 seconds of footage on her phone until she understood what she was looking at. Then she posted it. 11:47 at night. No caption. No hashtags. Just the video. By morning, it had 4 million views. By noon, Mayor Dale Whitmore was on live television in his best suit, standing in front of 2 flags, calling it a victory for the city of Colton Falls. Sarah watched him smile at the cameras and understood, with a clarity that felt almost physical, that the system was not broken. It was working perfectly. It just wasn't working for her. She was still sitting at that kitchen table at 2 in the morning when her phone rang. Unknown number. The voice on the other end was old, quiet the way a deep river is quiet. Not because nothing is moving, but because everything moving is too large to make noise on the surface. "Mrs. Harmon," the voice said, "my name is Rex. Danny rode with us for 11 years. I watched that video 4 times tonight." Sarah pressed the phone against her ear. "What happens now?" she whispered. Rex Callahan took one slow breath. "Now," he said, "we have a conversation." To understand why 2 rookie officers felt confident enough to throw a man onto concrete in broad daylight and strip the vest off his back, you have to go back 6 weeks. Dale Whitmore was losing. Not dramatically. Not because of a scandal or a single catastrophic mistake. Just the slow, quiet way that people stop believing in someone. The way you don't notice a leak until the ceiling comes down. 6 years as mayor of Colton Falls had given him a taste of something larger. The state Senate seat was right there. He could see it. He had been positioning himself for 18 months, fundraising quietly, building alliances carefully. Then the polls moved 11 points in the wrong direction in 4 months. His chief of staff, Kevin Briggs, 29 years old and sharp in the way that young ambitious men in politics tend to be sharp, sat across from him one evening in the mayor's office with a legal pad and a very simple idea. "People don't vote for politicians," Briggs said. "They vote against threats. You need a villain, Dale, something visible, something that already makes people nervous when they see it on the street." Whitmore looked at him. Briggs tapped his pen on the legal pad. "The Hells Angels Charter on Industrial Drive," he said. 31 years in this city. Most people have never had a problem with them. But most people also cross the street when they see that patch coming. Fear, Briggs said, doesn't have to be rational. It just has to be visible. Whitmore picked up a pen. Municipal Code 7A was drafted in 9 days. It prohibited the public display of gang-affiliated insignia, patches, and identifying apparel within the city limits of Colton Falls, Nevada. The language was broad. The target was specific. Everyone in that council chamber knew exactly who it was aimed at. Chief Frank Dolan read the draft on a Wednesday morning and drove straight to the mayor's office without calling ahead. Dolan had been police chief of Colton Falls for 14 years. He was 60 years old, built like a man who had spent his 20s doing things he didn't discuss at dinner parties, and he had spent the better part of a decade maintaining a careful, functional peace with the charter on Industrial Drive. He set the draft on Whitmore's desk and put one finger on it. "Dale," he said, "I need you to think about what you're doing here." Whitmore leaned back and smiled. "Frank," he said, "I need those numbers to move. This moves numbers. You're not going to like what else it moves," Dolan said. He laid it out carefully. Rex Callahan was not a hot-headed street criminal. He was a 61-year-old combat veteran with a Purple Heart and a plate in his left shoulder who had spent 4 decades building something that, whatever you thought of it, ran with a discipline most legitimate organizations would envy. The man did not react. He responded. There was a significant difference between those two things. Whitmore waved a hand. They're a gang, Frank. The optics are simple. Dolan looked at him for a long moment. You're poking something you don't understand, he said. And when it pokes back, my people are the ones who have to stand in front of it. Whitmore signed the ordinance 3 days later at a press conference with 2 television cameras and a photographer from the local paper. 11 minutes of law and order and Colton Falls families and difficult decisions. By any political measurement, a strong performance. Dolan watched it on the small television in his office. When it was over, he picked up the phone and called his watch commander. Pull our 2 newest patrol officers off desk rotation, he said. Give them Route 17 and the South End. Tell them Municipal Code 7A is on the books, but enforcement is at my discretion. They observe and report, nothing else. He hung up. He should have put that order in writing, because Officer Brett Calloway and Officer Sean Purcell were 14 months out of the academy and burning with the particular hunger of young men who had chosen a uniform because they wanted to matter. They had read Municipal Code 7A carefully. They had the language memorized. They had been riding Route 17 for 6 days with that printed card in their breast pockets, waiting. When they pulled into the Sunrise gas station that Thursday morning and saw Danny Harmon standing beside his Harley in full colors, they didn't call it in. They didn't radio for guidance. They didn't think about Chief Dolan's verbal instruction to observe and report. They thought about the cameras on their dashboards. They thought about Whitmore's press conference. They thought about what it would feel like to be the officers who made the front page. They pulled in, and a 28-year-old woman named Sarah Harmon, who had just finished a 12-hour overnight shift and was standing 40 feet away, with a tank half full of gas and a coffee she hadn't opened yet, became the only witness to what happened next. She already knew what it cost. What she didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that 60 miles away, in a cinder block building on the edge of Industrial Drive, Rex Callahan had just finished watching her video for the 4th time, and had reached for his phone. Sarah Harmon spent the first 24 hours after Danny's arrest doing everything a person is supposed to do. She called the public defender's office at 8 in the morning. A tired voice told her Danny's arraignment was scheduled for Thursday. The charge was resisting arrest and failure to comply. It would probably be fine, the voice said. Probably. She drove to the police station on Merchant Street at 9. She stood at the front desk and asked to speak to whoever was in charge of the officers who had arrested her husband. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set man in his 50s who had the look of someone who had been delivering bad news for so long it had stopped feeling like news, told her that complaints regarding officer conduct needed to be submitted in writing to the Internal Affairs Division. Processing time was 60 to 90 business days. 60 to 90 business days. Sarah looked at him for a moment. She asked about Danny's vest. The desk sergeant told her that items seized during a lawful arrest were held as evidence and could be reclaimed after the case was resolved through proper channels. Proper channels. She drove to the city attorney's office at 10. She waited in a plastic chair for 37 minutes before a young woman in a gray blazer came out, listened to her for 4 minutes with the careful, neutral expression of someone trained to give nothing away, and told her that the city did not comment on active cases involving its officers. She called 3 private attorneys before noon. The first one didn't take cases against the city. The second wanted $3,000 up front just to open a file. The third one, the kindest of the 3, a soft-spoken man named Gerald Hatch, who had been practicing in Colton Falls for 30 years, listened to everything Sarah said without interrupting, and then told her gently but clearly that a viral video was powerful in the court of public opinion, but substantially less powerful in an actual courtroom, and that without physical evidence of excessive force beyond what the video showed, the case against 2 officers acting under a legally enacted municipal ordinance was going to be a very difficult one. Sarah thanked him and hung up. She sat in her car in the parking lot of Gerald Hatch's office building for a long time without starting the engine. 4 million people had watched Danny bleed on the concrete. The video had been shared by senators, celebrities, television anchors. 3 separate news vans had parked outside her house that morning. A producer from a national cable network had left 3 voicemails asking for an exclusive interview. The story was everywhere, and not one single person with the power to actually do something had done anything. She drove home. She ignored the news vans. She sat at her kitchen table and opened her laptop and read every comment under the video until she couldn't read anymore. Thousands of people furious on her behalf. Thousands of people telling her to stay strong. Thousands of people who felt exactly what she felt and could do exactly as much about it as she could, which was nothing. She closed the laptop. That was when Mayor Dale Whitmore appeared on her television for the second time in 2 days. He was doing a sit-down interview with the anchor of the local evening news. A friendly, powder blue set, soft question kind of interview that had clearly been arranged by his communications team. He was in the same navy suit. He was relaxed. He had the look of a man riding a wave he had been waiting for a long time. The anchor asked him about the video. Whitmore nodded thoughtfully, the way a man nods when he has already rehearsed the nod. He said that he understood emotions were running high. He said that he respected the role of social media in public discourse. Then he leaned forward slightly, the practiced lean of a man making a point he wants to land, and said that what the video actually showed, if you watched it carefully, was 2 officers doing their jobs professionally and lawfully under a municipal ordinance that the city council had passed with full transparency. He said the real story wasn't the video. The real story was why a man affiliated with a known criminal organization felt entitled to flaunt that affiliation on the public streets of a family city. He said the word entitled, the way politicians say it when they want you to feel something without being able to accuse them of saying it directly. Sarah watched his mouth move on the screen above her kitchen counter and felt something shift inside her. Not anger. She was past anger. Something colder than anger. The particular cold that sets in when you realize that the person causing you harm is not confused about what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. They're just counting on the fact that you can't stop them. She thought about Danny in a holding cell somewhere across town, waiting for Thursday. For probably fine. She thought about that leather vest in the trunk of a patrol car. She thought about the desk sergeant and the city attorney and Gerald Hatch and 60 to 90 business days and proper channels. And the 3 news vans outside her house, full of people who wanted her story, but not her problem. She picked up her phone. She almost didn't answer when it rang at 2 in the morning. Unknown number, Nevada area code. She was exhausted and hollowed out, and had spent 12 hours learning in vivid detail exactly how alone she was in this. But she answered, and the voice on the other end, old, quiet, the kind of quiet that has already decided everything, said 4 words before she could speak. Mrs. Harmon, we saw. Sarah closed her eyes. Rex Callahan didn't waste time on pleasantries. He told her his name. He told her Danny had ridden with his charter for 11 years. He told her he had watched the video 4 times and had spent the better part of the evening making phone calls. What kind of phone calls? Sarah asked. The kind, Callahan said, that don't need to be explained over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? There's a diner on the south end of Industrial Drive. 7 o'clock. Sarah looked at the ceiling of her kitchen for a moment. She had spent 24 hours doing everything right. Everything the system told her to do. Every proper channel. Every official process. Every legitimate avenue available to a person in her situation. And she was exactly nowhere. What do I need to bring? She said. Just yourself, Callahan said. And whatever Danny told you about why that vest matters to him. He hung up. Sarah set her phone on the table. Outside, one of the news vans was still parked at the curb, its satellite dish pointed at the sky, waiting for a story. She turned off the kitchen light and went to find something to wear for 7 in the morning. For the first time in 24 hours, she felt something that wasn't cold. She didn't have a name for it yet either. But it felt, just slightly, like the direction of something changing. The diner on Industrial Drive didn't have a name on the sign anymore. Just a faded outline where the letters used to be, and a red neon coffee cup in the window that buzzed faintly every few seconds like it was trying to say something important, but kept forgetting what. Sarah got there at 6:55. Rex Callahan was already sitting in the back booth. She recognized him from the charter's website. A photograph she had looked up at 4 in the morning after he'd hung up. 61 years old. White beard, arms that told stories through ink she couldn't read from across the room. He was drinking black coffee and reading a folded newspaper the way men of a certain generation read newspapers, like the information in it deserved the full weight of his attention. He looked up when she walked in, stood up, extended a hand. "Mrs. Harmon," he said, "thank you for coming." His hand was the hand of a man who had spent 40 years working with them. Sarah shook it and sat down across from him, and the waitress came and poured her coffee without being asked. The way waitresses in diners like this always know without being asked. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Callahan set his newspaper down and looked at her with the particular directness of someone who has decided that the shortest distance between two people is the truth. "Tell me what happened," he said. "Not the video. What happened before the video?" So Sarah told him. She told him about the overnight shift and the gas station and the way Calloway had moved toward Danny before Danny even had time to register what was happening. She told him about Purcell's forearm and the gasoline on the concrete and the sound the vest made when it came off. She told him about Danny's face on the ground. Callahan listened without interrupting, without nodding along in the performative way people nod when they're waiting for their turn to talk. He just listened, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup, his eyes steady on hers. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "That vest," he said finally. "Did Danny ever tell you how long he carried a prospect patch before he earned his full colors?" Sarah shook her head. 4 years, Callahan said. 4 years of showing up, of proving himself, of being trusted with things that matter and handling them the way they need to be handled. The day he got his full patch, he called me from the parking lot of the clubhouse, and I could hear him trying not to cry and not quite managing it. He said, Callahan paused, and something moved briefly across his face that was there and gone before Sarah could name it. He said it was the first time in his life he felt like he'd earned something that nobody could take away from him. Sarah felt the back of her throat tighten. They took it away from him on a concrete parking lot in front of his wife, Callahan said. Because a politician needed a headline. That's what this is. That's the whole story. He picked up his coffee, set it down without drinking. "I'm going to ask you something, Mrs. Harmon, and I need you to answer it honestly." Sarah nodded. "Do you want justice," he said, "or do you want Dale Whitmore to understand what he did?" Sarah looked at him across the table. "Those aren't the same thing," she said. Callahan almost smiled. "No," he said, "they are not." She thought about it for less than 5 seconds. "Both," she said. "I want both." Callahan nodded slowly, like she had given the right answer to a question he already knew the answer to. "Good," he said. "Then here is what I need from you. I need you to go home. I need you to not talk to the press, not talk to the city attorney, not talk to anybody representing the city or the department until I tell you otherwise. Can you do that?" "For how long?" Sarah asked. Callahan looked at his watch. It was 7:12 in the morning. 72 hours, he said. "Give me 72 hours. Sarah looked at this old man in a back booth of a diner, with no name on the sign. This man she had met 11 minutes ago. This man whose photograph she had found at 4 in the morning, when she had nowhere else to look. She thought about 60 to 90 business days. She thought about proper channels. She thought about Gerald Hatch telling her gently that the video was powerful in the court of public opinion. "Okay," she said. Callahan stood up. He left enough cash on the table for both coffees and a tip that was more than the bill. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at her one more time. "Danny is a good man," he said. "What happened to him was wrong, and wrong things that go unanswered have a way of teaching people that wrong is acceptable." He picked up his newspaper. "We're going to teach them something different," he said. Then he walked out of that diner, and Sarah sat alone in the back booth with her coffee and watched through the window as he climbed onto a Harley-Davidson that had no business looking as clean as it did and rode south down Industrial Drive and disappeared. She went home. She didn't call the press. She didn't call the city attorney. She cleaned the kitchen, paid 2 bills she had been putting off, and sat on the back porch in the October sun and tried not to think about what 72 hours meant. She didn't know what Rex Callahan did for the rest of that morning. She found out later, piece by piece, from Danny, from Arthur Webb, from a highway patrol captain named Davis who told the story at a conference 2 years after it happened and couldn't keep the reluctant admiration out of his voice. Callahan got back to the clubhouse at 7:45. Arthur Webb was waiting in the parking lot. So were 6 other senior members. They had seen the video. They knew what the meeting with Sarah Harmon meant. They had been waiting for Callahan to come back and tell them what came next. Callahan parked his bike, walked past all of them without a word, went inside, sat down at the head of the long wooden table, and put his phone in front of him. "What are we doing, Rex?" Arthur said. Callahan looked at the phone for a moment. Then he looked up at the men around that table. "Danny wore those colors for 11 years, he said. He never once gave us a reason to question him. He was on his knees with his hands up and they still took it, in front of Sarah, on camera. And then the mayor of this city went on television and called it a victory." The room was very quiet. Callahan picked up the phone. "This isn't about the ordinance," he said. "The ordinance is paper. Paper burns. This is about what happens when someone decides that the rules only apply to us, and not to them. This is about whether we are the kind of people who let that stand." He looked around the table one more time. Nobody said anything. Nobody needed to. He dialed. The first call went to Tucson, Arizona. The president of the charter there picked up on the second ring. Callahan said 4 sentences. The president said 2 words, "We're coming," and hung up. The second call went to Boulder, Colorado. 3 rings, same 4 sentences, same 2 words. Portland, Oregon, Las Vegas, Nevada, Flagstaff, Arizona, Reno, Salt Lake City. 4 sentences, 2 words, 4 sentences, 2 words. He made 11 calls in 22 minutes. Then he set the phone down and looked at Arthur. 72 hours, he said. "Tell everyone. Full colors. Route 17. Stay outside the city limit marker. We don't cross that line under any circumstances. We don't speed. We don't threaten. We don't give them a single arrestable thing." Arthur was already writing. "We break down," Callahan said. "All 600 of us. Same time. Same place. Mechanical failure. Simultaneous. It's the damnedest coincidence anybody ever saw." A slow smile moved around the table. Callahan didn't smile. He picked up his phone and made one more call. This one longer than the others. This one to a man in Oakland, who had been doing this longer than almost anyone still living. When that call ended, Callahan sat for a moment, with the phone in his hand. Then he looked at Arthur. "Get me a map of Colton Falls," he said, "and find out exactly where the city limit marker sits on Route 17. Arthur nodded. "And Arthur," Callahan said, his voice dropping just slightly. "Yeah. Find out what Dale Whitmore is planning for Saturday morning." Saturday morning came to Colton Falls the way it always did in October. Cold and clear and full of the particular quiet that belongs to early weekend mornings in small cities, when the streets are still empty and the light is still low and everything feels like it might just be okay. Dale Whitmore was in a good mood. He had spent Friday evening reviewing the guest list for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The new Route 17 commercial off-ramp had been 3 years in the making. Federal funding, state matching grants, 2 rounds of environmental review, 1 lawsuit from a property owner that had taken 14 months to settle. It was the single largest infrastructure project in Colton Falls history. And it was done, on time and under budget. And this morning, it was going to be his. The brass band was booked. The television crews were confirmed. The Chamber of Commerce president would be standing to his left, and the state transportation secretary would be standing to his right. And the cameras would be rolling at 9 o'clock sharp, and Dale Whitmore would cut a red ribbon with a pair of gold scissors and say the words he had been rehearsing for a week. His poll numbers had jumped 9 points since the video. 9 points. Kevin Briggs had shown him the overnight tracking numbers at 6:30 in the morning, with the look of a man who had backed the right horse and knew it. Whitmore read them twice, set them down, and told his driver to have the car ready at 8:15. He was still thinking about those 9 points when Chief Frank Dolan called at 7:48. Whitmore almost didn't answer. He was in the middle of getting his tie right, and Dolan's calls on Saturday mornings were rarely good news. But something made him pick up. "Dale," Dolan said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to not talk until I'm finished." Whitmore stopped adjusting his tie. "State Highway Patrol has been tracking motorcycle formations since 4 this morning," Dolan said, "coming in from 6 different directions: Arizona, Colorado, Oregon, Nevada, Utah. They've been riding through the night in organized formations, 2 by 2, staggered, obeying every traffic law on the books. Highway patrol units have been following them for hours and have found zero grounds for intervention. Zero. Whitmore said nothing. As of 7:30 this morning, Dolan said, consolidated tracking puts the total count at somewhere between 580 and 620 motorcycles, all converging on this valley. They will reach the outer perimeter of Colton Falls in approximately 40 to 50 minutes. Whitmore found his voice. Then arrest them, he said. The moment they cross the city limit in those jackets, Municipal Code 7A. They're not crossing the city limit, Dolan said. Whitmore stopped. I got a call 20 minutes ago from Captain Gregory Davis of the State Highway Patrol, Dolan said. He has units on Route 17 right now. The formations are holding position exactly 1/4 mile outside the city limit marker. They are stopping there, all of them. A long silence opened up on the line. They're parking on the state highway, Dolan said. Outside our jurisdiction, every single one of them. And every single one of them is claiming mechanical failure. What? Whitmore said. Mechanical failure, Dolan said again. And something in his voice was carefully, professionally flat in the way that a man's voice gets flat when he is working very hard not to say what he actually thinks. 600 motorcycles, all broken down simultaneously. Captain Davis says his men are out there right now and there is nothing, not one single thing they can legally do about it. Whitmore sat down on the edge of the bed. Then get tow trucks, he said. Clear the road. Dale, Dolan said. To tow 600 motorcycles off a state highway would require every tow truck in 3 counties working continuously for approximately 72 hours. I don't have that. The state doesn't have that. And until those bikes are formally declared abandoned, which requires a separate legal process that takes days, we cannot touch them without opening the city to a civil rights lawsuit that would cost us more than the Route 17 project did. The Route 17 project. Whitmore stood up very fast. The ceremony, he said. Dolan was quiet for exactly 1 second. Route 17 is completely blocked, he said. From the county line to the city limit, nothing is moving. No freight, no tourists, no media vans. The television crews that were supposed to set up at the ceremony site called the city press office 40 minutes ago to say they couldn't get through. The Chamber of Commerce president is sitting in a traffic backup 7 miles from the venue. The state transportation secretary's driver just turned around and went back to Carson City. The brass band, Whitmore said, and he hated himself for saying it. Hated that that was the thing his mind went to, but he said it anyway. The brass band got through, Dolan said. They were already on site when the blockade went up. So you've got a brass band and about 30 folding chairs and a red ribbon in an empty parking lot. Whitmore stood in the middle of his bedroom with his tie half done and his gold scissors on the dresser and 9 polling points that suddenly felt very far away. Do something, he said. Frank, do something. I have 85 sworn officers, Dolan said. I deployed 60 of them to the city center per your instructions on Friday. The remaining 25 are managing traffic on the secondary roads. I have no one to send to Route 17 even if I had the legal authority to act there, which I do not. This is state jurisdiction, Dale. It has been from the beginning. A long silence. This is your mess, Dolan said quietly. I told you what would happen. I told you in your office with the draft on your desk. I told you clearly. He hung up. Whitmore made it to the ceremony site at 9:20. The brass band was playing to an empty parking lot. 30 folding chairs in neat rows with nobody in them. A red ribbon strung between 2 poles shifting slightly in the October wind. A photographer from the local paper who had gotten through on a side road and was now standing off to one side with his camera hanging at his hip, not shooting, just watching. Whitmore stood beside the ribbon with his gold scissors and looked at the empty chairs for a moment. Then he turned to Kevin Briggs, who had arrived pale and sweating in a car that had taken 2 hours to navigate the secondary roads. Fix this, Whitmore said. Briggs looked at him with the expression of a man who has just understood, fully and completely and with no remaining room for denial, that there is nothing to fix. The 9 points, the press conference, the Navy suit, the rehearsed speech, all of it sitting in an empty parking lot with a brass band playing to folding chairs. "Sir," Briggs said carefully, "I don't think this is fixable from here." Whitmore turned away from him and looked out at Route 17 in the distance, where nothing was moving. Where nothing had moved for 2 hours. Where 600 men in leather vests were sitting on their motorcycles, drinking coffee from thermoses, and playing cards on the asphalt and, according to one highway patrol report that Dolan had forwarded to Whitmore's phone, directing emergency vehicles carefully through the shoulder lane to make sure nobody in actual distress was affected by the blockade. Directing emergency vehicles through. Whitmore read that part of the report 3 times. They were making sure the ambulances got through. They were making sure nobody got hurt. They were sitting outside his jurisdiction on a state highway with broken-down motorcycles, and they were being so careful, so disciplined, so completely and utterly within the law that there was not a single image on any of the news helicopters now circling overhead that showed anything other than a group of men sitting peacefully beside their bikes. One helicopter feed he had pulled up on his phone showed 2 bikers helping a family lift a stroller out of a minivan that had been caught in the backup. The mother was smiling. One of the bikers was making faces at the baby. Whitmore put his phone in his pocket. He stood there beside a red ribbon in an empty parking lot while a brass band played behind him and tried to think of what to do next, and couldn't think of anything at all. That was when his other phone rang. The one with the number only 12 people in the state had. He looked at the screen. Governor Elaine Marsh. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Dale," the governor said, and her voice had the particular quality of a person who has already decided exactly how angry they are and has moved past anger into something more efficient and more dangerous. "I have the CEO of the Western Freight Coalition in my office. I have the Federal Department of Transportation on hold on another line. I have 3 of my transportation staff watching news helicopter footage of 600 motorcycles sitting on a federally subsidized interstate corridor. And I have a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a $47 million infrastructure project that is currently being attended by a brass band and nobody else." "Governor," Whitmore started, "you picked a fight," she said, "to move poll numbers, with people who have been in that city for 31 years without costing me a single phone call. And now I am getting phone calls, Dale. I am getting a great many phone calls. We just need the state police to clear. I am not putting my troopers in the middle of a confrontation with 600 people on live national television to save your career," the governor said. Her voice was perfectly level. That was somehow worse than shouting. "I am giving you 1 hour. If Route 17 is not moving by 10:30, I will sign an emergency order diverting the Route 17 federal maintenance funding to the county. I will call a press conference at 11 o'clock, and I will explain to the people of this state, in detail, exactly how this happened and whose decisions caused it." She paused. "1 hour, Dale. Fix it. Or I will fix it for you in a way you will not recover from." The line went dead. Whitmore stood in the empty parking lot with the phone against his ear for a moment after she hung up, listening to the silence, and the brass band playing behind him, and very distantly, from the direction of Route 17, the faint sound of 600 men doing absolutely nothing at all. He turned to Kevin Briggs. "Get me Dolan," he said. "Tell him I need to talk to Callahan." Briggs nodded and took out his phone. "And tell him," Whitmore said, his voice dropping to something that was not quite a whisper but was headed in that direction. "Tell him I said please." Out on Route 17, Sarah Harmon was sitting on the hood of her car on the shoulder of the county road that ran parallel to the highway, close enough to see the formations of bikes stretching back as far as the eye could reach, close enough to hear the low murmur of men talking and laughing and the occasional clink of a thermos. She had been there since 7 in the morning. Nobody had told her to come. Rex Callahan had not called her. She had just woken up at 5:30, made coffee, watched the first highway patrol reports come in on the local news, and driven out here because she needed to see it with her own eyes. 600 men. For Danny. For a vest. For the look on his face on the concrete that she still saw every time she closed her eyes. A highway patrol trooper had come by at 7:45 and asked her to move her car further onto the shoulder, which she did, and he had tipped his hat and gone back to his cruiser, and that was the only interaction she'd had in 2 hours. She sat on the hood of her car in the October sun and watched the news helicopters circle, and felt something she had not felt since the morning at the gas station. Not cold, not alone. Something else. She was still trying to find a name for it when her phone rang. It was Rex Callahan. "Mrs. Harmon," he said, "are you somewhere you can watch?" "I'm on the county road parallel to Route 17, she said. "I can see everything." "Good," he said. "Stay there. This is almost done." She looked out at the 600 bikes glinting in the morning sun. "Rex," she said, "how did you know they would fold?" A brief silence. "I didn't," Callahan said, "but I knew that we could hold longer than they could. We've been holding a long time, Mrs. Harmon. That's something they never understand about us. They think we're impatient. They think we're reckless. They think we react." He paused. "We've been waiting 31 years for someone to push hard enough to find out what we actually do." He hung up. Sarah set her phone on the hood beside her and looked at Route 17 and waited. Frank Dolan drove out to Route 17 alone. He left his service weapon on his desk. He told his watch commander where he was going and told him not to send anyone after him. He drove a plain gray sedan instead of a patrol vehicle because he wanted to arrive as a man, not as a uniform, and because he had known Rex Callahan long enough to understand that the distinction mattered. He parked behind the line of state trooper vehicles and walked the rest of the way on foot, 200 yards of open asphalt in the October sun, past idling highway patrol cruisers, past the line of news cameras that had set up on the shoulder, past 600 men in leather vests who watched him come without a word. The sea of bikes parted for him the way it parts for very few people. Callahan was sitting on a folding chair someone had produced from a saddlebag, reading the same newspaper he had been reading in the diner 3 days earlier. He looked up when Dolan stopped in front of him. He folded the newspaper. He did not stand. "Frank," he said. "Trace," Dolan said. It had been a long time since he had used that name. Callahan's road name was Ironclad, and that was what everyone called him. But Dolan had known him since before the road name, and on a day like this, it felt right to use the name his mother had given him. Callahan looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded, just slightly, in the way of a man who appreciates a thing without needing to say so. "He wants to talk," Dolan said. "I know," Callahan said. "What are your terms?" Callahan didn't hesitate. He had known what his terms were since 7:45 on the morning Sarah Harmon walked into a diner on Industrial Drive. "Municipal Code 7A, he said. "Repealed. Publicly. Today. I want the paperwork signed and announced before a single bike on this highway moves an inch." Dolan nodded. "I can make that happen. He's desperate enough to sign anything right now." "Second," Callahan said, "all charges against Danny Harmon dropped, completely, with prejudice, and I want his release confirmed before we move." "Done," Dolan said. "What else?" Callahan was quiet for a moment. Around them, 600 men waited in the kind of silence that is not empty, but full. Full of everything that had brought them here, everything that had been taken, everything that had been proven in the past 3 hours, simply by the fact of their presence. "Danny's vest," Callahan said. Dolan looked at him. "Danny's vest," Callahan said again, and his voice had changed just slightly. Not softer, but more careful. The way a man's voice gets careful around something that matters. "I want it returned. Not by a desk sergeant. Not by a courier. Not mailed to the clubhouse in an evidence bag." He looked at Dolan steadily. "I want Dale Whitmore to carry it out here himself," Callahan said. "Past the cameras. Past the news helicopters. Past every person watching this on television right now. The same way he stood in front of those cameras and called it a victory. I want him to stand in front of those same cameras and hand that leather back to me with his own hands." The October wind moved across the highway. Somewhere in the backup, a car horn sounded once and then stopped. Dolan blew out a long breath. "That's going to end him," he said. "Politically. Completely." Callahan looked at him without expression. "He disrespected our colors on television," he said. "In front of this city. In front of Danny's wife. He made Danny feel like nothing in front of the woman he loves. He fixes it, the same way he broke it. In public. On camera. So that every person who watched him smile about it gets to watch him carry it back." Dolan was quiet for a moment. He thought about the draft on the mayor's desk and his finger on it and the words he had said. "You're poking something you don't understand." He thought about the verbal order he had given his watch commander that had never been put in writing. He thought about Calloway and Purcell and the 14 months between them and the printed card in their breast pockets. He thought about Danny Harmon face down on the concrete with his palms bleeding, not fighting, not struggling, doing everything right. "I'll get him," Dolan said. He walked back the way he came. It took 40 minutes. 40 minutes for Dolan to drive back to the ceremony site. 40 minutes for the conversation in the empty parking lot that Dolan never described in detail to anyone, but that Kevin Briggs, who was present for part of it, later said was the quietest and most devastating conversation he had ever witnessed. 40 minutes for a Black City SUV to navigate the secondary roads out to the county line. Sarah watched it pull up from the hood of her car. She watched the door open. Dale Whitmore stepped out into the October sun, and he looked like a man who had aged considerably since the last time she had seen him on television. His navy suit was still on, but the jacket was open, and the tie was loosened, and his silver hair, which was always combed back just right, had come slightly undone on one side. Draped carefully over both his forearms was a black leather vest with a winged death's head on the back. He carried it the way you carry something you understand, finally, that you had no right to touch. The 600 men watched him come, and nobody made a sound. No jeering, no shouting, no engines revving, just silence. The particular silence of people who have already won, and know it, and don't need to perform it. Whitmore walked the 200 yards from the SUV to the front line of the bikes. Every step on that asphalt in front of the cameras, in front of the news helicopters, in front of the 600 men, and the highway patrol units, and the county road where Sarah Harmon was sitting on the hood of her car, with her hand over her mouth. He stopped in front of Rex Callahan. Callahan stood up. They were close to the same height. Whitmore in his expensive suit, and his loosened tie, and his expression of a man walking through something he cannot stop. Callahan in his colors, with his white beard, and his arms full of decades, and his eyes that gave absolutely nothing away. Whitmore held out the vest. His hands were not entirely steady. "The ordinance has been repealed," he said. His voice was audible, but barely. "The charges have been dropped. Mr. Harmon will be released within the hour." Callahan looked at the vest for a moment. Then he reached out and took it with both hands. He turned it over. He checked the patches, the winged death's head, the bottom rocker, the side patches that told Danny's 11 years of history in the language of the club. He ran his thumb along the seam where Calloway had yanked it and found it intact. He folded it carefully over his arm. He looked at Whitmore. "Mr. Mayor," he said. Whitmore met his eyes for the first time. "I hope," Callahan said quietly, "that this was worth what it cost you. Because what you tried to take from us, from Danny, from his wife, from every man standing on this highway today, that was never yours to take. You don't get to decide what a man's life means. You don't get to weigh it against your poll numbers and find it wanting." He paused. "That's the thing about dignity," Callahan said. "It doesn't negotiate." Whitmore said nothing. There was nothing to say. He turned and walked back to the SUV, 200 yards back the way he came, past the cameras, past the silence, past the 600 men who watched him go without a word. He got in. The door closed. The SUV drove away. Callahan watched it go. Then he turned to face the 600 men who had ridden through the night, who had sat in the October sun for 3 hours, who had shut down a major American highway without breaking a single law, or throwing a single punch, or giving anyone with a camera a single image that was anything other than disciplined, patient, and completely in control. He didn't make a speech. He didn't need to. He raised his right hand and made one sharp forward motion. 600 hands reached for 600 ignition switches. The sound that followed was not a roar. It was something larger than a roar. It was the sound of something that had been held very still for a very long time, finally being allowed to move. 600 V-twin engines firing in a cascade that rolled back through the formation like a wave and shook the concrete pillars of the Route 17 overpass and sent birds off the power lines in every direction and carried across the valley floor for miles. Sarah heard it from the county road. She pressed both hands flat against the hood of her car and felt it vibrate through the metal and up through her palms and into her chest. And she understood, in that moment, what Danny had been trying to explain to her for years about what the sound of those engines meant to the men who rode them. It meant we are still here. It meant you did not break us. It meant we came when one of us needed us. And we will always come. And there is nothing you can do about that. And there never will be. The formation rolled forward. 600 bikes in perfect staggered columns, moving south away from Colton Falls, dispersing at the county junction in every direction. Arizona, Colorado, Oregon, Nevada, Utah. Back to the cities, and the charters and the cinder block buildings they had ridden from 2 nights ago. Callahan was the last to go. He paused at the junction and looked back once at the county road where Sarah's car was parked. She raised one hand. He raised one hand back. Then he turned south and rode away, and the sound of his engine faded into the October distance until there was nothing left of it at all. The Route 17 commercial off-ramp opened 3 weeks later with no ceremony. A city employee cut the ribbon with a pair of regular scissors on a Tuesday morning. 2 people watched. A photographer from the local paper took one photograph that ran on page 7. Danny Harmon was released from the Colton Falls Detention Center at 2:17 in the afternoon. On the same Saturday, the blockade ended. Arthur Webb picked him up. Nobody told him what had happened on Route 17 while he was inside. They let him find out the way everyone else did, from the news footage on Arthur's phone on the drive back to the clubhouse. Danny watched the footage without speaking. When it ended, he handed the phone back to Arthur and looked out the window for a long time. When they pulled into the clubhouse parking lot, Sarah was already there, leaning against her car with her arms crossed and her eyes red. And she had his vest folded over one arm, and she held it out to him when he got out of Arthur's truck, and he took it, and stood in the parking lot holding it for a long moment before he put it on. He didn't say anything, neither did she. He just put his arms around her and she put her face against his shoulder, and they stood there in the parking lot, while around them the members of the charter came out of the clubhouse one by one and stood quietly and let them have it. 6 months later, a state ethics commission completed its investigation into the drafting and enforcement of Municipal Code 7A and released a report finding that the ordinance had been enacted for political purposes without adequate legal review, and that its enforcement had resulted in documented civil rights violations. Dale Whitmore resigned the mayoralty on a Thursday morning in April. He gave a brief statement from his home. No cameras, no press conference, no Navy suit. He said he had made decisions based on what was good for his career instead of what was right for the people he served. He said he understood now that those were not the same thing. Kevin Briggs left city government the same week and went to work for a nonprofit in Reno. Officers Calloway and Purcell received formal disciplinary action and were required to complete civil rights retraining. Calloway left the department 8 months later. Purcell stayed and, by several accounts, became a considerably more careful officer. Chief Frank Dolan retired the following January after 30 years of service. At his retirement dinner, which was held at a restaurant on the south end of town, Rex Callahan showed up without being invited and sat in the back and had a beer and left before the speeches started. Dolan saw him on the way out, and they shook hands in the parking lot, and that was all. Sarah Harmon went back to work at Colton Falls Regional Hospital the Monday after the blockade. She worked her shift. She drove home. She made dinner. Danny was in the garage when she got home, working on somebody's engine, the music going. The garage door opened to the October evening. He had his vest on over his work shirt the way he always did. She stood in the garage doorway for a moment and watched him work. He looked up and saw her. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said. She went inside and started dinner, and that was it. That was the whole thing. 2 people in a house at the end of a day, the way it was supposed to be. She thought sometimes about what Rex Callahan had said to her across a diner table on a Tuesday morning when she had been out of options, and out of channels, and out of everything, except the 43 seconds on her phone. "What happens now?" she had asked, and he had said, "Now we have a conversation." She understood now that the conversation had never really been with Whitmore. It had never been with the city attorney or the Internal Affairs Division or the Ethics Commission. Those were all just consequences. Side effects. The real conversation had been the one that happened on Route 17. 600 men and one empty highway, and the sound of engines that said, simply and completely, and without any room for misunderstanding, "We see you. We came. And we will always come." That was the whole conversation. Everything else was just details. Some people spend their whole lives believing that power belongs to the people who hold the titles, the offices, the ordinances, the gold scissors, and the navy suits. Dale Whitmore believed that too. Right up until the moment he carried a leather vest 200 yards across an empty highway and handed it back to the man it belonged to. Power, it turns out, has very little to do with titles. It has everything to do with whether the people standing beside you would ride through the night to be there when it matters. Danny Harmon knew that. He knew it every time he put that vest on. It just took the rest of Colton Falls a little while to understand it, too. Thank you for riding this one out with Heart Tales. If this story hit something in you, drop a comment below. We read every single one. Tell us, was there a moment in this story where you would have done something different? We want to know. If you're not subscribed yet, join the Heart Tales family. New stories every week, and they only get better from here. 2 more stories are waiting for you on the end screen right now. Pick one. We'll see you there. Disclaimer. This is a fictional story inspired by real themes of brotherhood, dignity, and justice. All characters, locations, and events depicted are entirely fictitious. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. This story is intended for entertainment purposes only.